In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to mix 9 different colors you might not have on your palette, including Alizarin Crimson, Dioxazine Purple, Burnt Sienna, Sap Green, and more. I've included timestamps in the description below so you can jump to the color you're most interested in. This first trick is about earth colors. If you have Burnt Sienna, you can mix Burnt Umber, and vice versa. Let me show you how. Here's the thing, I can take the Burnt Sienna and add just a touch of the ultramarine blue, and I can achieve a brown that's very similar to the Burnt Umber. So that looks pretty close to the Burnt Umber. I kind of prefer the Burnt Sienna over the Burnt Umber, but you could also go in the other direction and take some Burnt Umber and add a small amount of the Cad Red Light and get something similar to the Burnt Sienna. That might be a little too much red. So I would say that's pretty close to the Burnt Sienna. So if you have one of these earth colors, you can make something that's pretty close to the other earth color. Light green permanent is a vivid green, but you can mix it yourself. One tip is that you can look up these pigment codes and that'll tell you which pigments to use to make this paint. There's 3 different pigments in here: phthalo green blue shade, iridite yellow, and titanium dioxide. I don't have iridite yellow, but I think benzimidazoline yellow should work. I'll squeeze some of this out just so we can compare it to the color that I mix. So this is phthalo green blue shade, and I'll add some of this yellow to it. It's a little bit dark. I can add some white to it. And it looks like I could go a little bit more yellow. I think that's about it. I'll just make a big swatch out of this. So there you go. You don't need to buy light green permanent as long as you have phthalo green blue shade. I like to keep a tube of sap green on hand because it's really convenient to have a natural looking green on hand already. But you can mix it yourself, and I'll show you how you can do that now. All right, so this is golden sap green hue. I'll squeeze some of this out just so we can have something to compare it to. The pigments are listed on the back, and those are phthalo green yellow shade, red oxide. They list nickel azo yellow. All I have is this nickel azo gold, which I think should work. And I also might use some of the benzimidazoline yellow. We'll see how it goes. You don't always need the exact same colors. You can get a pretty close approximation using other colors. And I'll add the nickel azo gold. And you can see this is starting to take on a similar shade as the sap green. There is black in there, so I'll add a little bit of carbon black. I might not even need the red oxide because I think this gold color will do it. Maybe a little more black. It might have went a little too dark. I could add some yellow in there, see what that does. And some more of the phthalo green. I think that's pretty close. I'll brush it out onto the swatch and see what it looks like. Yeah, that's pretty close. And here's what the sap green from the tube looks like. It's pretty much the same color. There's another option if you don't like sap green. There's hooker's green. It's a little bit more opaque and bluish. I have the version from Liquitex. This is pretty old. They don't even make these bottles anymore. So it contains phthalo green blue shade and isoindolinone yellow. That's a mouthful. I don't have that yellow. I'll just use some other shade. So this is what it looks like. If I spread this thin, you can see it's more bluish, whereas this is more transparent and yellow. So you might like this one better if you don't like the yellow part of this. This color is named after William Hooker. He was a botanical illustrator. He combined gamboge with Prussian blue and it made this nice green that works well for painting foliage. The problem with gamboge is that it's not light fast. That's the reason why they use different pigments to make this color, and they call it Hooker's Green Permanent, which implies that it should be light fast. So here's the phthalo green blue shade. I'll use the same color I used for the sap green. And I think I'll put out some of this benzimidazoline yellow medium in case I need it. The basic idea of getting a dull green is just adding a warm color to it. So here's quinacridone magenta. I should be able to get close to this. It might not be totally perfect, but let's see. So here's the phthalo green, benzimidazoline yellow. I think I'll add some of this nickel azo in there. It looks too dark. Maybe more of the yellow will help. It's not too bad right there. I think that looks a little bit more bluish. I can add a little bit of this phthalo blue in here. I think that's pretty close. I'll just quickly make a color swatch out of that. So this is Cobalt Teal from Liquitex. It's kind of a bluish green. I figured I'd include it in this video in case you're wondering how to mix it. This is phthalo green blue shade and benzimidazoline yellow, white. Let's start by adding white to the phthalo green. And I also need phthalo blue green shade. It's pretty close. You really can't get exactly like it, but it's a pretty good substitute. Maybe just a little bit more blue. Should probably mix up more of this just so I can get a color swatch. That's pretty close. I don't know if you can see that in the video, but the Cobalt Teal is a little bit more saturated, but that's not too bad. This is Dioxazine Purple, and we'll use that as a reference. I'll add some white to it to lighten it up because it's really dark right from the tube. So that makes a rather vibrant purple. I'll add more white to it so we can get a better idea of what this purple looks like. Let's see how close we can get to that dioxazine purple by mixing magenta with ultramarine blue. This is quinacridone magenta and ultramarine blue. You have to fiddle with the balance between the ultramarine blue and the magenta in order to get that to look like dioxazine purple. I'll add a little bit of titanium white to lighten it up a bit. This seems to have more magenta in there. I can add a little bit of ultramarine blue in there to make it more purple. It's pretty close to the dioxazine purple, and I can add more white to it just to see what the pastel version of it is. So that works pretty good. You can use that as a substitute for dioxazine purple. You can tell the pigments that Golden used to make this Alizarin Crimson hue. They're listed right on the label. PR122 is quinacridone magenta, PY150 is nickel azo yellow, and PG7 is phthalo green blue shade. And I can use those colors to mix the exact same shade of Alizarin Crimson. Here are those three colors. You can see the magenta is a little bit more vivid. So it's PR122, PY150, PG7. You could look up the pigment codes online and just search on Google. There's a link to an entire video about how to use pigment codes in the description below. I'll demonstrate how to mix Alizarin Crimson from these colors. So I'll start with the quinacridone magenta, and that's more vivid than the Alizarin Crimson. To make it darker, I'll use a little bit of the phthalo green. You can see how dark that makes it. And then to make that warmer, it's the nickel azo yellow. So it's just a matter of getting the proportions right between these three colors. This looks a little too orange. I can add in a little bit more of the green. Probably would help if I were to spread this out a little bit more and get a better idea of how warm or cool it is. So it looks like there's more magenta in there. What happens if I add more magenta? That seems to be pretty accurate to what Golden has. I might add just a little bit more of that purple. I'll brush it out on paper and we can compare it to the one from Golden. It's not bad, but I think it needed more of the phthalo green in there. I think that's about right. So I'd say those look pretty much identical. This is a neat mixture too, where phthalo green blue shade and quinacridone magenta makes like this dark bluish color. And it can even look somewhat purple. And that's what made that color kind of like a brownish color. So you can use either Burnt Sienna or Burnt Umber. They both will make black. So here's the ultramarine blue. And then I'll mix in some of the Burnt Sienna. And you have to get the ratio right. So this right here looks like it has a little bit too much brown in there. It's pretty close though to being black. I think it needs a little blue to make it less warm. And that's the thing about mixing your own black is that you can leave it either cool or warm depending on what you want. You can tell if it's neutral or not by spreading it out thin, and sometimes you can see that there's a bias to it. A more reliable way would be to add some white to it. So I'll just pick some of this up and add a little bit of white to it. That looks pretty neutral to me, so there's the first formula. If you'd like to learn more about color mixing, be sure to check out my color mixing playlist, which includes additional color matching and color mixing demonstrations. And if you'd like a more structured approach to color mixing, I've also created a complete color mixing course. You'll find links to both in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.